pile of self-improvement books on your shelf, the audiobook queue, the highlighted passages in the books you finished 6 months ago. Reading is great, don't get me wrong, especially books that help you better your mind, your philosophy, your life. But sometimes it can produce the feeling of growth without any of the substance. You're not getting better by reading. You're getting better only when what you read becomes what you do daily for long enough to change something. Everything else is intellectual entertainment dressed up as personal development. And here's the truth. The reading is not the work. The reading is the easy part. The work is application. Application is rare. Application is what changes a life. Almost everybody who's been reading self-improvement books for years could point to dozens of books they've read and name almost no principles they've actually applied for 90 days or longer. The gap between what they've read and what they've practiced is enormous. And the gap is where the failure to change resides. You see, this is one of the strangest patterns in modern adult life. The self-improvement category is enormous. Sales are huge. Books get devoured. Audio gets listened to during commutes. The market is massive. The actual change produced in the lives of the readers is small in aggregate because almost none of the material gets applied. Most readers read another book before they've finished applying the last one. The cycle continues. The library grows. The life doesn't. Today, I want to walk you through 5 things you must understand about this. By the end, you'll see exactly why your reading has been producing so little change and exactly what to do differently, starting with the next book you pick up. The fix isn't to stop reading. The fix is to stop reading without application and to start reading with the explicit intent of doing what the book teaches. Now, before we get into the 5 things, you have to understand what years of reading without application actually cost. Because most people who read self-improvement books don't see why the reading hasn't produced the changes they expected. They blame the books. They go looking for better books. They keep reading, hoping the next one will be the one that changes everything. You cannot read your way to change. The next one rarely is, because the variable was never the book. Here's the truth. The cost of years of unapplied reading isn't just the time you spent reading. It's the time you didn't spend doing. The hours that went to reading about discipline could have gone to practicing discipline. The hours that went to reading about wealth building could have gone to building wealth. The hours that went to reading about better relationships could have gone to deepening relationships. Each hour spent reading without application is an hour subtracted from the doing that would have produced change. You see, this is the deepest cost. The reading produces a feeling of progress that prevents the actual progress. The brain registers the reading as growth, gives you a hit of intellectual satisfaction, and then moves on. The application that would have produced the actual growth doesn't happen because the reading already provided the dopamine the application would have given you. The substitute became the activity. But here's what most readers in their late 40s realize. The hundreds of books they read over the decades produced very little of what they hoped reading would produce. They know more in some sense. They can quote authors. They can reference frameworks. Their life is roughly the same as the life of somebody who never read any of it, because none of it became practice. The knowledge stayed theoretical. The life stayed unchanged. You cannot read your way out of a stuck life. The stuck life is unstuck only by changed behavior. Changed behavior requires application, sustained for long enough to install new patterns. No amount of reading replaces the application. The reading can inform the application. It can never substitute for it. You must take this seriously, because the impulse to read another book instead of applying the last one is one of the most reliable patterns in self-improvement culture. The next book will promise the missing piece, but the next book is rarely the missing piece. The missing piece is almost always application of something you've already read. The first thing you must understand is that reading without application is intellectual entertainment, not personal development. The brain rewards reading new ideas with a dopamine hit that mimics the feeling of growth. The hit is real, the growth is not. The two feel similar from inside the experience, and the similarity is what makes this so hard to notice. You see, the brain doesn't distinguish well between learning that's going to change your life and learning that's going to sit on a shelf in your memory and produce nothing. Both feel like progress while they're happening. The reading session feels productive. The new idea feels like an upgrade. The connections you're making feel like growth. Your sense of having developed is genuine. It just isn't accurate. Here's the truth. Reading is not application. Reading produces the feeling that mimics application. The brain that's been steadily reading self-improvement material for years has developed an entire vocabulary of growth language, references, frameworks, and concepts. None of that vocabulary has changed the actual life of the reader. The vocabulary became its own self-contained world in which reading is the activity and behavior change is not. You got to start treating reading like input only, with output required afterward. The output is the application. You read the book, you then identify one specific principle from the book that you're going to apply. You commit to applying it for 90 days minimum. You don't read another book in that category until the 90 days are complete and the principle has been tested in your life. What you'll find is that this single change reduces your reading volume dramatically and increases your behavior change dramatically. Where you used to read a book a month, you now apply a book over 3 months. Where you used to read 12 books a year, you now finish 4 with full application of each one. The reading total drops. The actual development goes up by an order of magnitude. But here's the upside. The books you do read get treated differently. You read them more carefully. You take notes that are about how you'll apply the material, not about which passages were elegant. You finish a book and immediately design the application. The reading becomes purposeful instead of recreational. The reading becomes the start of the work, not the work itself. You cannot keep choosing comfort. Most people refuse to do this because the reading is so much more pleasant than the application. The reading is comfortable. You sit, you absorb ideas, you feel smarter. The application is uncomfortable. You have to do new things. You have to install new behaviors. You have to push against your existing patterns. The discomfort is the price. Most people refuse to pay it and choose more reading instead, which produces more comfort and less change. The second thing you have to understand is the math. One book applied for a full year produces dramatically more change than 50 books read in the same year. The math isn't close. The application compounds. The reading doesn't. You see, this is what almost nobody internalizes when they're deciding whether to keep reading or to start applying. The reading feels like more progress because more books equals more knowledge in some abstract sense. The application feels like less progress because you're working on the same book for months without adding to your shelf. The intuition is backwards. The application produces the actual change. The reading produces the knowledge that goes nowhere. Here's the truth. I am telling you. The compounding works on application, not on exposure. Each principle you actually apply, sustained for 90 days or longer, becomes part of who you are. It's installed. It runs automatically. It changes how you operate going forward. But the principle you read once and forgot has done nothing for you. The two are not comparable, even though the reading version felt like more. And the principles that get installed compound on each other. One discipline installed makes the next discipline easier. One habit installed creates the platform for the next habit. By the time you've installed 5 or 6 principles over 5 or 6 years, the cumulative version of you operates at a level the no application version of you couldn't reach with another 100 books read. You've got to accept the math and operate accordingly. Pick one book, apply it, then pick the next. Each book becomes a year-long project, not a weekend read. The pace feels slow at first. The output, after 5 years, is dramatically larger than the same 5 years of voracious reading would have produced. Here's what else you'll discover. You'll discover that one book applied teaches you more about the principle than 10 books read on the same topic. Because the application is where the depth lives. The book gives you the framework. The application teaches you what the framework actually means in the real world. The friction, the edge cases, the variations, the integration with the rest of your life. None of that is accessible to the reader who never applies. All of it is accessible to the practitioner. And one principle deeply understood beats 10 principles superficially encountered. The deep understanding is what allows you to actually use the principle in real situations. The superficial encounter, what most reading produces, gives you nothing usable when the situation arises. You remember reading something about this somewhere, but you can't quite apply it. The principle stays theoretical. Pick one book at a time. Apply it for a year. By the end of a decade, 10 principles will be deeply installed. The 10 will produce more change than the 100 plus you'd have skimmed in the same period. The third thing you got to understand is the psychology behind the over-reading pattern. I'll read another book about it first. Instinct is not preparation. It's avoidance, wearing the disguise of responsible research. The reading delays the doing. The delay feels like wisdom. The pattern repeats indefinitely, while nothing actually changes. You see, this is one of the most reliable patterns in self-improvement culture. The person wants to change something. They read a book about it. They feel ready to start. They almost start. Then they decide they need to read one more book first to make sure they're approaching it the right way. They read the second book. They almost start again. Then they need a third book because the second one mentioned a third concept they should understand. The reading expands. The starting recedes. Here's the truth. The next book is not the answer. The book you've already read, if you applied it, would produce the change you're hoping for. The next book is more comfort, more research, more feeling like you're doing something. The actual doing keeps getting deferred because the doing is hard and the reading is easy. You got to recognize the pattern when it arises. The moment you find yourself thinking, I need to read more about this before I start, you stop. You don't read more. You start with whatever you've already read, with imperfect understanding, with the willingness to learn through application rather than through more pre-application reading. What you'll find is that the application teaches you things no reading could have taught you. The reading gives you a clean theory. The application gives you the messy reality. You'll discover what doesn't work the way the book said it would. You'll discover the parts that need adapting to your specific situation. You'll discover the difficulties the book glossed over. All of that learning is unreachable from inside the reading. All of it becomes available the moment you start applying. And the time between reading and starting is the highest leverage time in any self-improvement project. The reading gave you the framework. Starting immediately, while the framework is fresh, gets you running. Delaying the start to read more lets the framework fade while you accumulate more frameworks that will also fade. The starting is the move. The starting is the only thing that produces change. The more research instinct examined honestly is almost always fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of looking inexperienced, fear of starting and failing. The fear gets dressed up as responsibility. The responsibility prevents the action. The action is what you actually need. Start with whatever you've already read. The learning happens in the doing, not in the additional reading that's supposed to prepare you for the doing. The fourth thing is the practical rule that fixes most of this. Pick one book per domain. Apply every principle in it for a year. Then move to the next book in that domain. Or move to a different domain entirely. The rule is simple. The discipline is rare. The results are dramatic. You see, this rule contradicts almost everything the self-improvement culture promotes. The culture says read widely, sample many perspectives, stay current with the latest thinking. The single book per domain rule says no, you must pick one. You must apply it deeply and then move on. The depth is the variable, not the breadth. Let me tell you about a woman I once knew. She was in her mid-30s when I met her. She had been reading self-improvement books for over a decade. She had read, at a rough count, more than 50 books in the category. She could discuss the major frameworks. She could cite the authors. She knew the 7 this, the 5 that, the 4 habits, the 10 principles. Her library was substantial. Her life had barely changed. Her career was where it had been 5 years earlier. Her relationships were running the same patterns. Her finances were the same. Her body and health were the same. By every external measure, the 10 years of reading had produced no meaningful change in her actual life. She was puzzled. She had been doing the work in her mind. The work just wasn't producing results. A mentor asked her one question. The question was, of all the books you've read, name one principle you've actually applied for more than 90 days. She thought. She couldn't name one. She had read about hundreds of principles. She had applied none of them in any sustained way. The reading had been the activity. The application had not happened, not even once. He told her to do something different. Pick one book. The book she had read that, in her honest assessment, had the most principles that would change her life if applied. Then spend the next year applying every principle in that book. No more reading in the self-improvement category for the year. Just that one book. Applied across every dimension of her life. She resisted. The instruction felt restrictive. She wanted to keep reading. The mentor was insistent. She agreed reluctantly. She picked a book she had read 3 times already, a widely respected one in the personal effectiveness category. She started the year-long application project. The first month was mechanical. She listed every principle in the book. There were several dozen when she really looked. She picked a sequence in which to install them. She started with the first one. She applied it for a few weeks until it was running automatically. Then she added the second, then the third. By month 4, she had installed about 6 principles. Her mornings were different. Her relationships were being tended differently. Her time was being managed in a way the previous version of her had never managed it. The changes were small but accumulating. She kept going. By month 9, she had installed about a dozen principles. The cumulative effect was substantial. Her work had improved. Her income had increased. Her relationships had deepened. Her energy was higher. She was, by external measure, becoming a different person, slowly through application of principles she had read about for a decade without ever applying. By month 12, the book had been mostly applied. The principles were running automatically in her life. The transformation was visible to everyone around her. People asked her what she was doing differently. She told them. She had stopped reading and started applying. Just one book. Just the principles in that one book for a full year. She told me later, the year of applying produced more change than the decade of reading had produced. The math was clear in retrospect. The application was the variable. I am telling you, the reading had been the distraction. The fifth thing is more contrarian, and you must hear it clearly. The must-read list that gets circulated in self-improvement culture is mostly nonsense. The lists are largely social signaling. The books on them are largely interchangeable. What you actually need is not another must-read. What you need is to apply the books you've already read, but never applied. You see, this is one of the strangest features of self-improvement culture. There are lists circulating constantly. The top 10 books on success, the 50 books every entrepreneur should read, the 100 books to read before you die. Each list claims that these specific books are essential. Each list contradicts the others. None of the lists actually produce the change they promise, because the variable was never which books you read. Here's the truth. The must-read list is not the answer. The answer is to take the books you've already read, identify the most important principles in each, and apply them in your life. You'll discover that you already have enough material to produce dramatic change for the next several years without reading another book. The application is what was missing. The application is what would have made the books you've already read worth their cover prices. You got to do a personal inventory of the books you've read in the last 5 years. Pick the 3 or 4 that had the most useful principles. Reread them with the application lens. Pick the principles. Apply them. Spend the next 2 or 3 years applying what you've already read before reading another self-improvement book. What you'll find is that the books you previously thought were forgettable were full of useful material that you skimmed over the first time. The second reading, done with application intent, surfaces material the first reading missed. You'll find principles you don't remember encountering, because the first reading was for entertainment and the principles bounced off without registering. And the social pressure to keep up with the latest must-read fades. Most of the must-reads are not actually different from the older books. The principles are largely the same, dressed in new language. The pattern of new books producing the same old insights is constant. The newness is marketing. The substance in the better books has been roughly the same for decades. You cannot stay on the new book treadmill forever. You can step out. The books you've already read are enough. The application is the work that remains. Spend the next several years doing that work, and the change you've been hoping reading would produce will start arriving, finally, because the doing has finally caught up with the reading. This single shift from what should I read next to what should I apply from what I've already read is one of the most powerful moves available to chronic readers of self-improvement material. So here's the inversion you must make. Stop treating reading as the work. The reading is the easy part. The work is application. And the application requires that you stop adding new books and start using the ones you have. The mechanics are simple. First, do a personal inventory of the self-improvement books you've read in the last 5 years. List them. Pick 3 or 4 that have the most useful principles. Set the others aside. Second, pick one of the 3 or 4. Reread it with an application lens. Take notes. Not about which passages were elegant, about which principles you can actually apply in your life this month. Make a list of the principles. Order them by which ones would produce the most leverage if installed. Third, start applying the principles one at a time. Install one for a few weeks until it's running automatically. Add the second, then the third. The pace is deliberate. The point isn't to install everything immediately. The point is to install each one well enough that it stays installed when you move to the next. Fourth, after 12 months, look at the book again. The principles will be installed. The change in your life will be real. The next book becomes possible. Either you pick another from your existing shelf, or you read a new one with the same application intent. Fifth, you don't go back to the old pattern. The old pattern was reading for the feeling of growth without the substance. The new pattern is reading for the explicit purpose of application. Every book you read going forward gets treated as instructions to follow, not ideas to admire. Here's the truth. The version of you that reads 20 books a year and applies none of them is not growing. The version of you that reads 2 books a year and applies both of them is dramatically growing. The output of the second version over 10 years is unrecognizable compared to the first. You can be the second version, starting tonight, with the book on your shelf that you've already read, with one principle from it that you can start applying tomorrow morning, with the discipline to not pick up another self-improvement book until that principle has been installed. That's the whole reframe. Stop reading. Start applying. By the end of a year, you'll have produced more change than the previous 5 years of reading produced combined. Listen, here's what I want you to carry with you. Reading self-improvement material by itself produces almost no change. The change comes from application. The application is rare because it's harder than reading. Every single day, most people choose more reading instead of starting application because reading is comfortable and application is uncomfortable. The cumulative cost is years of reading that produce no meaningful difference. Tonight, walk to your bookshelf. Look at the self-improvement books you've read. Pick one, the one whose principles, applied for a year, would change your life the most. Open it. Find the most important principle. Decide how you're going to apply it starting tomorrow morning. Then start every single day after that, not next week, not after you've read one more book. Tomorrow, with the principle you've already read, with imperfect understanding, with the commitment to install that one principle over the next 90 days. I am telling you, this is one of the most underrated reframes in self-improvement. The category has trained you to read more. The actual move is to read less and apply more. The category benefits from your reading. Your life benefits from your applying. The two are not aligned. You have to choose the application over the reading deliberately against the pull of the culture. You must pick the one book. You must pick the one principle. You must apply it for 90 days. Then add the next principle from the same book. Spend the year on that single book, every single day applying something from it. By the end, the book will be applied in your life. The next book becomes possible. The pattern run for a decade produces a version of you that the chronic reader could never reach. The reading is not the work. The reading is the start. The application is the work. The years are not negotiable. They will pass either way. The only question is what they produce. The years of unapplied reading produced almost nothing. The years of applied reading ahead of you can produce a different life. Pick the book tonight. Pick the principle tonight. Start applying tomorrow morning. By the end of the year, the version of you that emerges will recognize this evening as the one where the pattern of reading without application finally broke. That's the entire technology. Everything else follows from the choice to apply instead of to keep reading. I'm telling you, this is one of the most powerful reframes available to anyone who has been reading without changing. The change is not downstream of more reading. The change is downstream of doing what the reading already told you to do, sustained, for long enough to install the new pattern. The years ahead can be different, not because you'll find better books, because you'll do what the books you've already read have already told you to do. Pick the principle, apply it. Watch what changes, then move to the next. By year 5, the version of you that emerges will be unrecognizable compared to the chronic reader you used to be. Tonight, the shift begins. Pick the book, pick the principle. Tomorrow morning, the application starts. The years are waiting to be used differently. Every single day from tomorrow forward, is an opportunity to install the principle. Run it, refine it, integrate it. By the end of 90 days, the principle is yours, installed, automatic. By the end of a year, the book has been applied. By the end of 5 years, several books have been applied. And the cumulative version of you is dramatically different from the chronic reader version. This is the path that almost nobody walks because the reading without application path is so much more comfortable. The chronic reader keeps reading year after year, accumulating books, accumulating language, accumulating frameworks. The application happens almost never. The change happens almost never. The years pass, the library grows. The life stays roughly where it started. You don't have to be that person. The break in the pattern is tonight. Pick the book, pick the principle, start tomorrow, run it for the year. Watch what happens when the reading finally produces the application that was supposed to be the point all along. That is the entire technology of this lesson. Nothing else replaces it. Nothing else gets you to the change the reading was always promising. The application is the work. The work begins tomorrow morning with the principle you picked tonight from the book that has been sitting on your shelf, waiting for you to actually do what it said all along. The waiting ends tonight. The doing begins tomorrow. The change arrives over the year that follows. And then the next book becomes possible, treated with the same discipline, applied the same way, producing the same compounding change that the chronic reader version of you never reached. Decade after decade, principle after principle.